I'm Abigail, 35, and when Dad died last spring, my siblings laughed at me during the will reading. While Richard got the mountain cabin and Diana received the beachfront condo, I inherited Dad's struggling gas station with its mountain of debt. They called me the family failure for accepting this worthless junk, but Dad always told me to look beneath the surface. What none of us realized then was that this rundown property held a $200 million secret. Before I tell you how I discovered what my father knew all along, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on my greedy siblings. Growing up, I was the only one of Robert Sullivan's 3 children who actually enjoyed spending time at the family gas station. While Richard and Diana complained about the smell of gasoline and the embarrassment of having friends see them there, I treasured those Saturday mornings starting from age 12 when Dad would pick me up in his old pickup truck. "Rise and shine, Abby," he'd say, handing me a hot chocolate as we drove through the quiet streets of Pinewood before dawn. The station wasn't much to look at even back then. A small convenience store attached to 4 pumps under a weather-beaten canopy. Sullivan service had been in our family since my grandfather opened it in 1952. Dad taught me everything about running the place, how to reconcile the register, check inventory, order supplies, and most importantly, how to treat customers. The secret to business isn't just about making money, he'd tell me while showing me how to properly check oil levels. It's about building trust. These people are our neighbors. They remember who treats them fairly when times get tough. Our little town of Pinewood had seen better days. Once a thriving logging community, the closure of the mill in the early 2000s had hit us hard. Many families moved away, and those who stayed struggled. Through it all, Sullivan's service remained a constant. Dad would quietly extend credit to families when they couldn't pay, accept vegetable trades from local farmers, and keep an informal community board where people could post jobs or items for sale. As bigger chain stations opened on the highway bypass, our business declined steadily. The equipment aged, the underground tanks needed replacing, and the computer system was practically antique. Still, a loyal group of customers kept coming back, not just for gas, but for the sense of community Dad had created. Richard left for college and never really came back except for holidays. He became an investment banker in Chicago, married a socialite named Amanda, and had 2 children he enrolled in private schools. Diana followed a similar path, becoming a real estate agent in Boston specializing in luxury properties. Her husband Jeffrey worked for a commercial development firm. Both my siblings made it clear they thought Pinewood was beneath them. I went to the state university, got my business degree, and worked for an accounting firm in Portland for a few years. But when Dad started having heart problems 5 years ago, I moved back home to help. My siblings thought I was crazy to throw away my career, as Diana put it, but I couldn't imagine not being there for him. During his final year, as his health deteriorated, several companies approached Dad about selling the station. The property sat on nearly 3 acres at what had become a busier intersection as the town slowly recovered. One developer offered $800,000, which seemed generous given the station's condition. But Dad refused every offer, sometimes angrily. "This place is worth more than they know," he told me once, during a late night when pain kept him awake. "Promise me you'll hold on to it, Abby. Look beneath the surface. What seems worthless to others might be priceless if you know where to look." I assumed it was the medication talking, or perhaps just sentimentality. Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days after that conversation. The will reading took place in Harold Patterson's law office downtown. Harold had been Dad's friend for 40 years, and his solemn expression as we gathered didn't hide his disapproval of my siblings' behavior. Richard and Diana had barely spent time with Dad during his illness, yet they arrived with expectant expressions, discussing what they'd do with their inheritance before the documents were even read. "Robert's estate is divided as follows," Harold began, adjusting his reading glasses. "To my son Richard, I leave my cabin property in the Blue Ridge Mountains, currently appraised at $2.8 million. Richard smiled smugly, nudging Amanda. "To my daughter Diana, I leave my beachfront condominium in Newport, valued at $3.2 million. Diana clapped her hands like a child, while Jeffrey nodded approvingly. And to my daughter Abigail, who has shown true understanding of value beyond price tags, I leave Sullivan Service Station, including all property, equipment, and accounts. The room fell silent for a moment before Richard burst out laughing. "You've got to be kidding," Diana said, turning to me with a pitying look. "That place is a money pit. It's got to be at least $200,000 in debt with all those repairs Dad refused to make." Harold cleared his throat. "The station currently carries approximately $180,000 in business loans and requires roughly $85,000 in immediate repairs to meet environmental regulations." Jeffrey leaned forward. "Abby, if you sign it over to our development group, we could probably give you $350,000 for the land value alone. That's being generous, considering the environmental liabilities." "Dad wanted me to have the station," I said quietly. "Because he knew neither of us would want that junk," Richard snorted. "Always playing favorites with his little gas station girl." "You can sell it to Jeffrey's company and at least get something," Diana added, examining her manicure. "Or watch it drag you into bankruptcy. Your choice." As we left Harold's office, I felt numb. My inheritance came with crushing debt and siblings who thought I was a fool. But something about Dad's final words kept echoing in my mind. "Look beneath the surface." I just didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. The reality of running Sullivan Service hit me like a truck the very first week. The station opened at 6 a.m. and closed at 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Dad had 2 employees, Martin, who had worked there for 20 years, and Lily, a college student who handled weekend shifts. Both looked at me skeptically when I announced I'd be taking over. "Your father knew what he was doing," Martin told me bluntly. "No offense, but do you?" I thought my business degree and accounting background would help, but the station operated on Dad's unique system that existed partly on paper, partly in ancient QuickBooks software, and partly in his head. Regular customers had unwritten credit arrangements. Suppliers were paid on schedules that made sense only to Dad. The register needed to be manually reconciled with a method that involved a spiral notebook and calculator. By the end of the first month, I was exhausted and demoralized. I discovered leaking underground storage tanks that needed $85,000 in repairs immediately. The bank called about late payments on loans I hadn't even known existed. Tax documents were in disarray, and sales were down nearly 30% from the previous year. One Tuesday evening, after a 14-hour day, I sat in Dad's tiny back office surrounded by invoices and felt tears welling up. My phone rang, Diana calling for the 3rd time that week. "Just checking if you've come to your senses yet," she said without preamble. "Jeffrey says his offer won't stay open forever. The environmental inspection reports look worse every month." "I'm figuring things out," I insisted, though my voice lacked conviction. "Figure out reality, Abby. That place is a liability, not an asset." Dad made a mistake. The financial pressure became crushing. I maxed out 2 credit cards paying for emergency repairs to the refrigeration units. I started sleeping on the pull-out couch in Dad's office to save on rent. When payroll came due and the account was short, I sold my car to make sure Martin and Lily got paid. Dad had been loyal to them. I would be too. Local customers were sympathetic but sparse. The convenience store side barely broke even. The service bay needed equipment updates I couldn't afford. Each morning, I woke up wondering if this would be the day I'd have to admit defeat. 6 weeks after the will reading, Richard showed up unannounced with a tall, tan man in an expensive suit. "This is Maxwell Harris," Richard introduced him, not bothering to ask if I was busy. "He's a developer interested in the property." Maxwell barely looked around before saying, "I can offer $350,000 as is. That's generous considering the environmental issues and demolition costs." "The property is not for sale," I replied firmly. "Everything's for sale at the right price," Maxwell countered with a practiced smile. "Your father turned down good offers out of sentimentality. That's no way to run a business." "My father knew exactly what he was doing," I said, though doubt gnawed at me. "Did he?" After they left, I received a formal inspection notice from the county environmental office. The soil around the old tanks showed contamination that would require a $120,000 remediation plan within 30 days or face daily fines and possible closure. My friend Stephanie came by that evening with takeout food, finding me surrounded by bank rejection letters for loan applications. "Abby, I know you loved your dad," she said gently, "but maybe this wasn't the gift you think it was. Maybe it was just all he had left to give you." "He said it was worth more than people knew," I insisted. "Maybe he meant sentimentally," she suggested. "Sometimes parents can't see that what they value isn't what's best for their kids. So, I should just give up? Let Richard and Diana be right? Maybe compromise? Get something rather than nothing? This place is killing you, Abby. You've lost weight. You never sleep. What would your dad want for you?" That night, alone in the office, I had my breakdown. I sobbed until my throat hurt, feeling betrayed by the father I thought had believed in me. Had he saddled me with his failures while giving my siblings valuable assets? Was I clinging to a sinking ship out of pride? I fell asleep at the desk, surrounded by past due notices and repair estimates, wondering if tomorrow would be the day I called Jeffrey and accepted his lowball offer. The office ceiling began leaking after a heavy rainstorm the following week. Water damage spread across the wood paneling, forcing me to remove sections to check for mold. As I pulled away a warped panel behind the old filing cabinet, my hand felt something unusual, a slight gap where there shouldn't be one. Curious, I moved the cabinet completely and discovered what appeared to be a door, painted to match the wall and nearly invisible until the water damage revealed its outline. It had no handle, just a small notch at the bottom. When I pulled, it opened with a creak. Inside was a small room I never knew existed, perhaps 8 by 10 feet. The walls were lined with maps, geological surveys, and stacks of folders. A metal desk held notebooks filled with my father's handwriting. Bulletin boards displayed newspaper clippings and correspondence dating back over 2 decades. My hands trembled as I examined the materials. These weren't random collections, they were meticulously organized research about the land under and around our gas station. Geological surveys showing underground formations. Correspondence with engineering firms. Property records of neighboring lots. And in a locked drawer, I found keys to open detailed core sample reports showing substantial natural gas deposits running beneath our property. The papers revealed that our station sat at the edge of what appeared to be a major natural gas reserve contained in shale formations. Dad had been collecting data for over 25 years, long before fracking technology had made such deposits commercially viable. The most recent reports, dated just months before his death, confirmed the presence of extractable resources potentially worth millions. I was so absorbed in the documents that I didn't hear the bell indicating someone had entered the station. When I looked up, Richard, Jeffrey, and Maxwell were standing in the doorway of the secret room, staring at the exposed maps and documents. "What the hell is this?" Richard demanded, stepping inside without permission. "Dad's private office," I said, quickly gathering papers. "Please leave." Maxwell moved forward, his eyes scanning the geological maps with new interest. "Are these surveys of the Pinewood Basin?" "Recent ones." Before I could stop him, Jeffrey snapped photos of several documents with his phone. "These look like gas deposit assessments," he said to Maxwell. "Get out," I ordered, my voice stronger than I felt. "This is private property." "Family property," Richard corrected. "And it seems Dad was hiding something significant from all of us." Maxwell's demeanor had completely changed. He now studied me with calculation rather than dismissal. "I'd like to revise my offer to $1.2 million, effective immediately. We can sign papers tomorrow." The sudden increase only confirmed what I suspected. These documents showed something valuable, something Maxwell recognized instantly. "The station isn't for sale," I repeated. After they left, I locked the secret room and stayed up all night reviewing everything. Dad had documented the discovery of the natural gas deposits decades ago, but had kept it quiet. More shocking were records showing he had been quietly purchasing surrounding properties through shell companies for years, small parcels that seemed worthless on their own but formed a strategic footprint when combined with the station land. I found draft agreements with energy companies that he'd never signed, some offering tens of millions for development rights. Why had he never moved forward? Why keep this secret, even as his health failed and the station struggled? The next morning, I contacted Thomas Blake, a geologist friend of Dad's mentioned in several notes. When we met at a diner outside town, he wasn't surprised that I'd found the room. Robert swore me to secrecy, he explained. He discovered the deposit by accident when replacing tanks back in '97. Initial tests showed promising results, but he wanted to be certain before doing anything. And was he certain? Thomas nodded. The Pinewood Basin Shale Formation is substantial, but your father wasn't just thinking about the money. He was concerned about the town, about doing it right. He kept delaying, buying more surrounding land, researching companies with the best environmental records. So, why not tell me? Why let me think I was inheriting a failing business? He didn't trust your siblings' motives. And he wanted to be sure you'd make decisions based on what was right, not just dollar signs. If everyone knew what was down there, the vultures would circle before you could make informed choices. The vultures were already circling. Diana suddenly became concerned about my well-being, dropping by the station with coffee and questions about the back office renovations. Richard hired someone to watch the property, a security consultant who parked across the street for hours. Jeffrey was spotted at the county records office, requesting property documents for parcels surrounding the station. Anonymous offers began arriving for specific adjacent properties Dad had purchased through shell companies, offers coming from business entities I traced back to Maxwell's development firm. They knew something big was happening, but didn't yet understand the full picture. I contacted Valerie Rodriguez, an independent petroleum geologist from the State University, sending her copies of Dad's research without revealing the property location. Her assessment confirmed what Thomas had suggested. Based on the data, the combined properties likely sat atop a natural gas deposit worth between $180 to $220 million with current extraction technology. Whoever collected this data knew exactly what they were doing, Valerie told me. They strategically acquired land along fault lines where access would be optimal. This wasn't amateur work. Dad's patient strategy over decades suddenly made sense. He hadn't just discovered a valuable resource. He had methodically positioned ownership to maximize its potential while waiting for technology and market conditions to reach ideal states, all while running a seemingly failing gas station as cover. The situation escalated when I received an urgent call from Lily one evening after closing. "Someone broke in," she said, her voice shaking. "The office is torn apart." I rushed back to find the secret room door wide open, filing cabinets emptied onto the floor, and the most detailed surveys missing. Security footage showed Jeffrey and Richard entering through a back door using keys they shouldn't have had. Diana had hugged me during her last friendly visit, ample opportunity to make impressions of my keys. I filed a police report, but Sheriff Wilson was a golf buddy of Richard's and dismissed it as a family misunderstanding. The message was clear: local authorities wouldn't help me against my connected siblings. The next blow came in legal form, a thick envelope delivered by courier containing a lawsuit filed by Richard and Diana. They claimed Dad had been mentally incompetent when making his will, citing his heart medication and alleged confusion in his final months. They demanded the will be nullified and all assets, including the station property, be divided equally among all siblings. The court issued a temporary freeze on any property transactions pending resolution. Just when I discovered the truth, I was legally prevented from taking any action to develop it. Local media picked up the story, with the Pinewood Gazette running a headline: "Family Fortune or Fiction? Sullivan Siblings Battle Over Gas Station Inheritance." The article heavily quoted Richard, claiming I had manipulated our father during his vulnerable final days to secure the most valuable family asset for myself. The community that had once supported me began to view me with suspicion. Rumors spread that I planned to sell out to big energy companies that would pollute the town's water supply. Longtime customers stopped coming, crossing the street to avoid conversation. The final straw came when I arrived one morning to find the station vandalized, greedy, spray-painted across the front windows. The bank called that same day to initiate foreclosure proceedings on the business loans I'd fallen behind on. My employee Lily gave notice, explaining apologetically that she couldn't handle the hostile atmosphere. That night, Stephanie visited again, finding me packing personal items from the office. "Maybe your siblings are right," she suggested gently. "Even if the property has potential, this legal battle could take years. You could settle, take a third of whatever it's worth, and move on with your life. Is this all really worth it?" I almost agreed with her. Then I discovered another violation. Someone had broken into the filing cabinet where I kept Dad's medical records, which proved he had been mentally sound until the end. The records were gone, undoubtedly to strengthen my siblings' legal case. For the first time since his death, I felt truly alone and defeated. Everything Dad had built and planned was crumbling through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, I arrived to find an elderly woman waiting by the station doors before opening time. Eleanor Freeman, 80 years old, had been coming to Sullivan's service every Tuesday for as long as I could remember. Dad always checked her tire pressure and topped off her fluids for free. "You look just like your father when he was worried," she observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. He had the same crease between his eyebrows. "It's been a difficult time," I admitted, unlocking the door. "Robert expected it would be," she said, following me inside. "That's why he asked me to hold on to something for you. Said I should wait until things looked darkest before bringing it to you." From her large purse, Eleanor produced a sealed envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. "Your father and I had coffee every week for 30 years, she explained. "He trusted me because I had no stake in any of this. My late husband worked for the mining company before the environmental disaster in '86. We know what happens when profit comes before people." Inside the envelope was a letter, a flash drive, and a key to a safe deposit box. I read Dad's words with tears streaming down my face. "My dearest Abby, if you're reading this, then things have gone as I feared they might. By now you've discovered what lies beneath Sullivan's service, and likely you've also discovered how greed can poison even family bonds. I found the natural gas deposits 28 years ago, purely by accident. At first, I planned to sell the information to the highest bidder, pay off the station's debts, and retire comfortably. But then Westfield Chemical came to the county, promised jobs and prosperity, and left behind contaminated groundwater and cancer clusters when they departed 5 years later. I watched neighbors suffer and die because someone valued quick profit over human lives. I vowed our discovery would be different. Over the years, I purchased surrounding parcels through separate corporations to avoid attention. I researched companies with the best environmental records. I developed plans for how proceeds could benefit Pinewood rather than just enrich our family. I left the station to you because, of all my children, only you will consider more than money. Richard and Diana measure wealth in dollars alone. You understand its true measure is in the good it creates. In the safe deposit box at First National, you'll find complete copies of all documents, detailed development plans, and evidence of your siblings' previous attempts to circumvent my wishes. The flash drive contains video recordings of my meetings with doctors confirming my mental competence, anticipating their likely challenge to the will. Trust William Hayes at Cornerstone Energy Consulting to help execute the development plan ethically. Contact Rachel Torres, environmental attorney, to protect both your interests and the town's. Remember, Abby, true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you do with what you're given. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you, but of all my children, you're the only one strong enough to bear it. With love and faith.
Dad.
Eleanor watched me compose myself after reading. Robert was the smartest man I knew, she said. And the most stubborn. He believed in you completely. With Dad's letter as my guide, I began to assemble a new strategy. First, I contacted William Hayes, who remembered Dad fondly. Robert was ahead of his time, William told me. He understood that resource development doesn't have to mean community destruction. I'd be honored to help implement his vision. Environmental attorney Rachel Torres reviewed the documents and immediately identified legal vulnerabilities in my siblings' case. Your father was meticulous in documenting his mental capacity. And there's clear evidence of your siblings attempting to access private property and records improperly. We can not only defend against their claims, but potentially countersue. The most difficult decision was accepting bridge financing from Pinewood Community Credit Union, using the geological surveys as collateral. It gave me enough to make back payments on the business loans and fund critical repairs, but came with considerable risk if the legal battles dragged on. With basic financial breathing room secured, I focused on rebuilding community support. I organized a town hall meeting at the local high school gymnasium, presenting a transparent overview of Dad's discoveries and his vision for development. Unlike the extraction companies that typically offered minimal local benefits, our plan included 1. A community ownership structure giving Pinewood residents profit participation. 2. Strict environmental protections exceeding federal requirements. 3. Local hiring guarantees and job training programs. 4. A permanent trust fund for education and infrastructure. Local business owners quickly saw the potential economic boost. Families appreciated the educational opportunities the trust would provide. Environmental concerns were addressed with third-party monitoring systems. This isn't just about making money, I explained to the packed gymnasium. It's about responsible stewardship of resources for community benefit. Exactly what my father wanted. By the end of the meeting, I had gathered over 300 signatures supporting our approach. The tide of public opinion began to shift back in my favor, with many recognizing that my siblings and Maxwell were proposing a conventional development that would extract wealth from the community rather than share it. The most powerful weapon in our arsenal came from Dad's safe deposit box, a complete video testament explaining his decisions, recorded 6 months before his death. In it, he was clearly lucid, detailing his rationale for the will structure and explicitly addressing concerns about mental capacity. Even more damaging to my siblings' case were documents showing Richard had secretly been on Maxwell's company payroll as a consultant for over a year, creating a clear conflict of interest. The property records revealed how strategically Dad had acquired the surrounding land, making our combined parcels the only viable access point to the largest portion of the gas deposit. Armed with this evidence, Rachel filed our countersuit just as the court date for my siblings' case approached. The legal tide was turning, but the most difficult confrontation was yet to come. The court hearing took place in the county courthouse, a grand old building where Dad had once taken me to watch civic processes in action. Always important to understand how justice works, he'd told 12-year-old me. Now I sat at the defendant's table with Rachel, watching Richard and Diana enter with their expensive Boston attorney. They avoided eye contact, whispering to each other as Judge Martha Williams called the court to order. Their lawyer, Bennett Keller, presented their case first, a polished performance about a beloved father's mental decline, his irrational favoritism, and my alleged manipulation. He dramatically produced medical records showing Dad's heart medication could cause confusion and impaired judgment. When Rachel cross-examined their expert witness, she calmly pulled out the complete medical records from Dad's doctor. "Dr. Phillips, are you familiar with these full records?" she asked. "I was only provided with selected pages," he admitted, reviewing the complete file. "And would you agree that the quarterly cognitive assessments show no decline in mental function, scoring in the highest percentile even 2 weeks before Mr. Sullivan's death?" The doctor reluctantly conceded this point, and the selective presentation of medical evidence clearly displeased Judge Williams. When Rachel played Dad's video testament, the courtroom fell silent. Dad sat in his favorite chair, healthy enough to still be at home, speaking clearly and directly to the camera. "I'm making this recording to confirm that I am of sound mind and under no undue influence. I've chosen to leave Sullivan Service Station to my daughter Abigail because she alone understands its true value beyond monetary worth. This decision is made with full awareness of the property's potential and with clear intent to ensure it benefits not just my family, but the community that has supported us for generations." Judge Williams listened to arguments for another hour before making her ruling. The court finds no evidence of mental incapacity or undue influence. The will stands as written. Furthermore, I find the selective presentation of medical evidence by the plaintiff's counsel deeply troubling and am referring this matter to the Bar Association for review. Richard and Diana looked stunned. Their lawyer began gathering papers hastily. Additionally, the judge continued, the countersuit regarding improper access to private property and documents will proceed to trial unless the parties reach settlement. Court adjourned. Outside the courthouse, local reporters gathered. Diana hurried to her car, but Richard paused to make a statement. We're disappointed by today's ruling, but remain convinced our father would have wanted his estate shared equally. We'll be exploring our options for appeal. I stepped up to the microphones next. My father made his wishes clear, and today the court affirmed them. Sullivan Service has been part of Pinewood for generations, and I intend to honor my father's vision by ensuring its development benefits our entire community. The legal victory was crucial, but I knew the real battle for Pinewood's future was just beginning. With the property rights secured, energy companies began approaching with offers. Initial proposals came in around $120 million, with minimal community benefits and standard environmental protections. William helped me negotiate with companies willing to consider our alternative approach. After weeks of meetings, Horizon Energy emerged as the partner most aligned with Dad's vision. Their revised offer of $200 million included all our community benefit requirements, exceeding regulatory standards for environmental protection, and a development timeline that would train and employ local residents. When news of the deal became public, Maxwell's development group attempted a last-ditch effort to disrupt it. At another town meeting, he presented dire warnings about potential environmental hazards and questioned the financial stability of our community participation model. As he spoke, Richard and Diana entered the back of the room, prepared to support his claims. But the mood had shifted dramatically since our previous gatherings. Community members stood to share personal stories about Dad's generosity over the years. Local business owners detailed the expected economic benefits. The high school principal outlined what the educational trust would mean for students who couldn't afford college. Maxwell grew increasingly frustrated as the audience responded coolly to his warnings. During a heated exchange with William about extraction methods, Jeffrey interrupted with what he thought was a convincing argument. What Mr. Harris isn't mentioning is that standard industry practice would provide substantial consulting fees to local representatives who facilitated the deal. Our arrangement would have distributed over $5 million in such fees to key community members. The room fell silent as people processed this accidental admission of planned kickbacks. The mayor, sitting in the front row, slowly stood. Are you saying your proposal included paying off local officials? Jeffrey realized his mistake too late. Maxwell quickly interjected, but the damage was done. By meeting's end, the community's support for our plan was stronger than ever, and Maxwell's company faced questions about potential ethics violations in previous developments. The final piece of my strategy involved addressing my siblings directly. I invited them to my home, the first time we'd spoken outside of court since the will reading. They arrived separately, Richard still projecting confidence, Diana more subdued. I'll get straight to the point, I said after they'd sat down. The development is moving forward with Horizon Energy. The proceeds will be approximately $200 million. They exchanged glances, calculating their expected shares if they somehow won on appeal. I'm offering each of you 5%, I continued. Richard nearly choked. 5%? You're getting 90% of $200 million while offering us crumbs. The remaining 90% isn't mine personally, I explained. Dad structured this, as I'm sure you've now figured out. 30% goes to a community trust. 40% is allocated to environmental remediation and monitoring. 20% becomes operating capital for sustainable business development in Pinewood. My personal share is also 5%. That's insane, Diana protested. No one gives away that kind of money. Dad would have, I said quietly. That was always his plan. And if we refuse your insulting offer? Richard demanded. Then you get nothing. The countersuit proceeds, with substantial evidence of your breaking and entering, document theft, and Richard's conflict of interest with Maxwell's company. Best case for you, it ties up any potential benefits for years. Worst case, there could be criminal charges. I let that sink in before continuing. However, if you accept the 5%, there are conditions. Community service requirements, public apology for the theft and false accusations, and ongoing board participation to ensure the funds are properly managed. Diana looked thoughtful, while Richard fumed. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He accused. Little Abby finally getting back at us for all those years of teasing. This isn't about revenge, I said honestly. It's about honoring what Dad built and making sure it benefits more than just us. He gave me the station because he trusted me to make the right choice, not the self-serving one. They left without accepting, but Diana called the next morning. I'll take the deal, she said. And I'll talk to Richard. He's angry, but he's also overextended on some investments. He needs the money more than he needs the fight. By week's end, both had signed the agreement. The local paper ran the headline, Sullivan's siblings reconcile, unite behind community development plan. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was a beginning. With my siblings' reluctant cooperation secured and community support solidified, we moved forward with the Horizon Energy Partnership. Their engineers confirmed what Dad's research had indicated. The natural gas deposit was substantial and accessible with minimal environmental impact using newer extraction technologies. The contrast between our approach and what Maxwell had planned became even clearer when investigative journalists uncovered his company's environmental violations in 3 previous developments. Communities had been left with contaminated water supplies and unfulfilled promises of economic benefits. Maxwell himself disappeared from public view after the Securities and Exchange Commission announced an investigation into his business practices. Diana surprised me by becoming genuinely interested in the community aspect of our plan. After her divorce from Jeffrey, who faced federal charges for fraud in an unrelated development project, she began attending planning meetings and offering genuinely helpful suggestions based on her real estate experience. I never really understood Dad's attachment to this town, she admitted during one late-night planning session. It always seemed so small to me, so limiting. Now I'm seeing what he saw, the connections, the potential. Richard took longer to come around. He viewed the community service requirement as punishment rather than opportunity, grudgingly fulfilling minimum hours at the local food bank. But even he couldn't deny the mathematics of the situation. His 5% would provide more stable income than his volatile investment portfolio, especially after his firm downsized following market corrections. The most satisfying moment came when Horizon CEO Barbara Mitchell visited Pinewood for the formal signing ceremony. National business publications sent reporters, attracted by the unusual structure of the deal and its community-centered approach. This is a landmark agreement, Barbara announced to the gathered crowd at what used to be Sullivan Service. Most energy companies extract resources and wealth from communities. This model ensures Pinewood not only maintains ownership stake, but builds sustainable prosperity beyond the life of the gas field. As photographers captured the signing, I noticed Eleanor Freeman in the audience, nodding with quiet satisfaction. Beside her stood Thomas, Dad's geologist friend, and several longtime customers who had supported the station through difficult years. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, how this moment represented the culmination of Dad's decades-long vision. The development process began immediately. The old gas station was carefully dismantled, with environmental remediation crews cleaning decades of minor contamination from the soil. Core samples confirmed the extent of the gas deposits, with estimates now reaching the upper end of projections, potentially $220 million in extractable resources. Multiple energy companies approached with competing offers, trying to outbid Horizon, but we honored our agreement. As William explained, the highest bidder isn't always the best partner. Horizon's willingness to work with the community model makes them the right choice, even if others waive bigger checks. The vindication extended beyond financial measures. Local families who had struggled since the mill closure saw new opportunities for employment. The community college developed specialized training programs for energy sector jobs, fully funded by the Development Trust. Infrastructure improvements began with road repairs and internet connectivity upgrades. During this period, Jeffrey's connection to Maxwell fully emerged through legal proceedings. He had been secretly negotiating to flip the property to a foreign investment group for substantial personal profit, completely bypassing any community benefits. When Diana discovered the extent of his deception, she filed for divorce and volunteered to testify in the ongoing fraud investigation. Richard's relationship with Maxwell proved more complicated. While he had accepted consulting fees, evidence suggested he hadn't known the full extent of the planned environmental shortcuts. When confronted with documentation of previous contamination incidents, he appeared genuinely disturbed. "I'm not a saint," he told me during a rare moment of candor, "but I wouldn't knowingly poison a town for profit. I thought Maxwell was cutting bureaucratic red tape, not safety measures." The town's perception of me transformed completely. From being viewed as the failed sibling who received the worthless inheritance, I became the one who had protected Pinewood's interests against outside exploitation. More importantly, I had honored Dad's vision of responsible development that benefited the many rather than enriching the few. 6 months after the court victory, the first phase of extraction infrastructure was completed, a modern facility employing 50 local residents, with another 100 jobs coming in Phase 2. Unlike traditional gas operations, this one incorporated advanced monitoring systems that detected potential leaks or issues before they became problems. Environmental science students from the state university conducted independent testing, confirming that groundwater remained unaffected. Where the old gas pumps once stood, construction began on a community center and park, funded by the Development Trust. Dad's name would be on the building, but at my insistence, a plaque would acknowledge all the longtime customers and employees who had kept Sullivan's service going through difficult years. The final vindication came when a national business magazine featured our development model as a potential template for responsible resource extraction. The Pinewood approach, they called it, highlighting how shared ownership and transparent operations created both profit and sustainability. The article included a photo of the old station next to the modern facility rising in its place, a powerful visual representation of transformation done right. As I stood watching construction crews working on the community center's foundation, Diana joined me unexpectedly. "Dad would be proud," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Not just of the money or the development, but of how you fought for his vision when everyone else thought it was foolish." "Even you?" I asked. She nodded. "Especially me. I thought I understood value better than anyone. Turns out I was calculating all wrong." 2 years after discovering Dad's secret room, I stood on the observation platform overlooking what had once been Sullivan's service station. The transformation was remarkable by any standard. The modern energy facility employed 150 local residents, many trained through programs established by the Community Trust. Environmental monitoring stations surrounded the property, feeding real-time data to displays in the community center and the local high school science department. The old gas station canopy had been preserved as a sculptural element in the center of Robert Sullivan Memorial Park, a green space where families gathered for picnics and community events. Children played on equipment designed to teach principles of energy and conservation through interactive features. Most meaningful to me was the Robert Scholars Program, which had already sent 12 Pinewood students to college with full scholarships. These weren't just academic achievers, but young people who demonstrated Dad's values of community service and ethical leadership. My own transformation had been equally profound. From the overwhelmed inheritor of a failing gas station, I had become the executive director of the Pinewood Community Foundation, overseeing the Trust's investments and programs. The role utilized my business background in ways I never imagined, creating sustainable opportunities rather than just quarterly profits. I still lived modestly compared to what might have been possible had I structured the deal differently. My 5% provided financial security, but the real wealth came from seeing Pinewood flourish. New businesses opened downtown. Families who had left years ago returned for the opportunities and quality of life. The school system, enhanced by trust funding, became one of the best in the state. Richard's journey surprised everyone, including himself. After the real estate market suffered a significant correction, his investments collapsed. The stable income from his 5% share became his financial lifeline. Initially resentful, he gradually developed appreciation for Dad's foresight. "It's the only part of my portfolio that didn't tank," he admitted during a rare family dinner. Dad somehow knew I'd need a safety net, even though I was too arrogant to see it. More surprisingly, Richard discovered unexpected satisfaction in his required community service hours. What began as a resented obligation evolved into regular volunteer work with a youth financial literacy program. His background in finance, stripped of its more predatory aspects, proved valuable in teaching young people practical money management skills. Diana's transformation was more dramatic. After divorcing Jeffrey following his conviction for fraud, she reassessed her priorities completely. She moved back to Pinewood, leveraging her real estate expertise to help develop affordable housing initiatives funded partly by the Community Trust. Her understanding of luxury markets helped create attractive, sustainable designs that avoided the institutional feel of typical affordable housing. "I spent years selling properties people didn't need at prices they could barely afford," she reflected. "There's more satisfaction in helping people find homes they can actually sustain." Most surprising was her apology. Not just the public one required by our agreement, but a private one that acknowledged years of dismissing Dad's values and my choices. While we would never be best friends, we developed a functional working relationship based on mutual respect for what each brought to the community's development. The Foundation's quarterly meetings became a family affair, with Richard, Diana, and me sitting alongside community representatives to review programs and investments. Our different perspectives, once a source of conflict, now provided valuable balance in decision-making. Eleanor Freeman, now 82, rarely missed a meeting, her institutional memory and straightforward assessments keeping us grounded. Robert would say, "You're overthinking this." She'd interject when discussions became too complicated. Usually she was right. Thomas Blake continued providing geological expertise, ensuring the extraction process remained environmentally sound. Martin, Dad's longtime employee, became the site historian, giving tours to school groups explaining how Sullivan's service had transformed into Pinewood Energy Partnership. One spring evening, I visited Dad's memorial garden alone. The cherry trees he'd always admired were in full bloom, creating a canopy of pink blossoms over the simple stone marker bearing his name. I sat on the bench installed there, reflecting on the journey since inheriting what my siblings had called junk. Dad's true gift hadn't been the gas station, or even the valuable resources beneath it. It had been the values he quietly demonstrated throughout his life: patience, integrity, and understanding that true wealth comes from what you give, not what you take. "You were right all along," I said softly to the memorial. The real value was beneath the surface in more ways than one. A young woman approached, Jessica, our newly hired community outreach coordinator. She reminded me of myself years earlier, eager, idealistic, slightly overwhelmed by responsibility. "Sorry to interrupt your moment," she said, "but we've received another inquiry about the Pinewood development model. A community in Arizona wants to adapt it for solar energy development." I smiled, thinking how pleased Dad would be to know his approach was spreading. "Tell them we're happy to share what we've learned. Success means more when it's multiplied." As Jessica left, I remained a moment longer with my thoughts. The journey had transformed not just the property and community, but my understanding of what matters most. Money reveals character rather than changing it. Looking beneath surface appearances often reveals unexpected treasures. Patience and principle ultimately outperform quick profit, and the connections we build with others constitute our most valuable assets. I finally understood what Dad had known all along. Real inheritance isn't measured in dollars, but in values lived daily. The wealth that matters can't be depleted through use, but grows stronger when shared. What's your experience with unexpected inheritance, either material or in values passed down? Have you ever discovered something valuable where others saw nothing but junk? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of looking beneath the surface resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that true value isn't always obvious at first glance. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember, sometimes life's greatest treasures require patience and faith to discover.